course, by and large, video games are experiences designed to entertain you from start to finish, but that doesn't mean developers can't have a little fun at your expense in the middle there. No matter the genre, franchise, or quality of the game in question, it's not always a given that every ability, item, or piece of gear you pick up will necessarily be useful. While this is often because you've hit a point in your game where you're overleveled, or perhaps said item is just a bit crap to begin with, sometimes it's another story. And that story is you getting trolled. If you picked up any of these items, you may as well have saved yourself the time and not bothered. Although the team who created them certainly got a kick out of your misfortune. I'm Jess from WhatCulture, and here are 10 items in video games that trolled you. Number 10, the Devil Axe, Fire Emblem series. Initially introduced in Fire Emblem Shadow Dragon and the Blade of Light, the Devil Axe is very high risk and high reward. In fact, it's so high risk, high reward, you could argue it's practically trolling you. While the stopping power of this thing compared to other axes in the game is formidable, it also features a pretty considerable drawback, which is that there's a chance it'll backfire and unleash damage on you instead of your opponent. You can mitigate this chance with a decent luck stat, but it's still going to be a dice roll as to whether you dole out some pain on yourself or somebody else. The backfire rate varies with every entry in the Fire Emblem series, but there's always a risk. It's a bit of fun if you like a high-stakes gamble, but if you're risk-averse, you might want to avoid this trolley axe. Number 9, the Magic Armor, The Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess. Not every video game item that trolls you does so in a way that's designed to make you laugh. Sometimes it might seem like the item has a bunch of utility, and it's only upon using it you realize it's not so handy after all. Twilight Princess has loads of different weapons, tools, and gear for you to equip, one of which is the Magic Armor. The Magic Armor is pretty special because it protects your health with a magical barrier. However, it slowly drains both Link's magic meter and wallet while you're fighting. That's right, this thing runs on rupees. This armor drains 2 rupees for every second it's equipped, and saps an extra 10 when you're hit by an attack that would otherwise take a quarter of a heart. While you might be stoked that it saps your rupees instead of your hearts, when you realize that running out of rupees or magic will render you defenseless and almost unable to move, you might feel a little ripped off. Especially since you can't carry unlimited rupees, so your luck is going to run out at some point. Number 8, the Belt of Free Action, The Elder Scrolls 3 Morrowind. Paralysis is a pretty large problem across every video game in which it appears. There's nothing as painful as not being able to dodge, attack, or move, so anything you might be able to do to rectify the condition is pretty appealing. Enter the Belt of Free Action from Morrowind, a belt which has the effect Cure Paralysis on Self. Handy, right? Sure, except that you can't actually use enchanted items that have cast when used properties when you're already paralyzed. So the whole belt being able to cure paralysis thing is sort of redundant when you can't use it while you're paralyzed. So yeah, your belt is kind of useless. Unless you're into the red and gold spiky design, then at least you got that going for you. Number 7, Crit, Borderlands 3. Now this gun is actually fantastic. Unlike some of the weapons and items on this list, the stats here are actually well above average. No, the troll here is much more specific and hilarious. This is Borderlands we're talking about after all. Alongside special weapon effects like 150% critical hit damage and healing the player for 8% of all damage you deal with the impressive submachine gun, it's also slippery when wet. What this basically means is that every single time you reload, you have a 5% chance of just dropping the thing, which is an A+ troll. Since the weapon is so powerful in doing damage while ensuring you remain nigh on unkillable due to being constantly healed, you're most vulnerable when reloading. Quite apart from the combat disadvantage that comes with losing grip on your weapon partway through a serious encounter, it's also presumably pretty embarrassing. Just try not to drop it anywhere you won't be able to retrieve it if you can avoid it. Number 6, the Optical Camo Suit, Ghost Recon Wildlands. Now, invisibility is a bit of a double-edged sword in video games. There's always the possibility that instead of enemies not being able to see you, you simply can't really see your own player character on the screen. Case in point, the optical camo suit from Ghost Recon Wildlands, which makes you slightly less likely to get spotted by enemies, but significantly less likely to keep track of yourself. It's basically a skin that makes your player character almost invisible, which, given this is a third-person shooter, isn't necessarily a bonus. Curiously, you'll remain as visible as ever to enemies once they spot you. It'll just take them a touch longer to notice you're there. Given it certainly looks like the suit will grant you full-on stealth, plenty of players were more than a little surprised to realize that it did very little other than fast-track them to an early, semi-invisible demise. Number 5. The Invisibility Sphere, Doom. Since we're on the topic of invisibility that doesn't exactly work how you wish it would, we better talk about the Invisibility Sphere from Doom. Also called a blur sphere or blur artifact in the game manuals, this pickup helps you by making enemy aim less accurate. That sounds somewhat helpful, except for when you're dealing with enemies who shoot projectiles, as you now have a much harder time predicting the trajectory of said projectiles. As a result, even though the goal was to make enemies less likely to hit you, they'll probably have a higher likelihood of making contact as they'll be flying all over the place. This likely wasn't an intentional troll, but given you'll have picked it up hoping it's actually going to help you out in combat and noticing it does the opposite, you'll feel pretty duped. Number 4. Soiled Trousers, Grim Dawn. The 2016 action RPG Grim Dawn gives you plenty of options for how to play and gear up, but not all loot is made equal, especially in an action RPG. The fact that this next item is called Soiled Trousers might have tipped you off that you were being toyed with by the developers. These trousers are classified as an epic leg armor, and they do in fact have a special ability, although admittedly, it's not the most dignified. The soiled trousers, which bear the description, "The previous owner seems to have left a little surprise in the seat of these trousers," and visually indicate that too, gives you the ability to throw feces, which, well, I'm sure you can work it out. While most who pick these up would have assumed they're simply a joke item so the developers could have a laugh, some dedicated players have actually designed builds around them, which is pretty entertaining. Number 3. The Sword of Dawn, Castlevania Symphony of the Night. Castlevania Symphony of the Night has a medley of weapons and gear that will help you carve through bad guys, and a selection of some that won't help you at all. Naturally, we're focusing on the latter, specifically the Sword of Dawn, also known as the Daybreak. This particular weapon sounds all well and good until we dig into what it actually does. You can pick this one up in the early section of the Inverted Castle. It doesn't do much damage, but its special attack can summon random Dawn warriors to fight for you, which does sound pretty epic. Unfortunately, the epicness starts and stops there because these guys do next to no damage and are mostly just there for the spectacle. Of course, you'll probably die while admiring your little army, hoping they defend you against Symphony of the Night's biggest bads, but hopefully you can appreciate the novelty pre-game over screen. Number 2. The Boots of Blinding Speed, The Elder Scrolls 3 Morrowind. It would have been easy to pack this list with examples from the Elder Scrolls and Borderlands series, but we've tried to limit ourselves. That said, the Boots of Blinding Speed do sound pretty promising. Of course, this is a list about items that trolled you, so given we're already down at number 2, I'm sure you're already pretty skeptical. Said skepticism would be rewarded, as are you, with these boots should you complete an escort quest for the Red Guard rogue Pemeni. Get her to her desired location in one piece and her shoes are all yours. Now, to be fair, these boots do in fact fortify speed by 200 points, so you are going to go fast. The issue is they also have a 100% blind spell on them, so you'll be going super quickly, but with no way of navigating where you're going. Boots of blinding speed, get it? Yeah. You can use the minimap to navigate, levitate just off the ground, or use a resist magicka spell or item to increase the utility of these tricky shoes, or you can just accept the joke and pop on some less problematic footwear. Number 1. Pendant, Dark Souls. Now, this is one I'm betting you've probably heard of before or seen in one of our other WhatCulture lists, but when we put together a list of items that pranked players, we didn't include it, and you guys were like, what the heck, so I'm including it here, so we're all good. From Software games, as a general rule, are largely uninterested in making sure you have a smooth sailing fun time from start to finish. That isn't to say they aren't fun. Souls games are riddled with epic highs and lows in beautifully realized gothic game worlds, but there is a healthy amount of developer on-player trolling thrown in there. One such example is with the pendant in Dark Souls. You'll have been pretty excited to pick this bad boy up. I mean, every little item and piece of gear helps in your battle against a sea of waking nightmares, but this necklace is the exception. Its very description says the item has no effect. But how could that be? Many players ask themselves. There must be more to this. And all of their searching would be in vain, because this pendant does indeed have no effect. You can trade it for multiplayer currency with Snuggly if you want to, but that's the extent of it. Game director Hidetaka Miyazaki even said he created this item to troll players. So there you go. Hard to give anything else the top spot here. You got us. That's the end of our list, but let me know down in that comment section which video game items managed to troll you. As always, I've been Jess from WhatCulture. Thank you so much for hanging out with me. If you like, you can come say hi to me on my Twitter account where I'm at Jess McDonald, but make sure you stay tuned to us here for plenty more great gaming lists.